Thank you so much, Charlie Harari. Thank you so much to the entirety of Olami for putting together this magnificent evening. Amazing. I have to say, I'm very, very happy with my job. But every once in a while, actually, my job makes me sad. Because they asked me to come for Shabbat, and what a historic Shabbat this was. And I was unable to be there because I have a job in a synagogue, and they don't let me take off Shabbats. So tonight, I'm a little bit jealous, I'm not gonna lie. But I have the opportunity to speak to you for a short amount of time, and I'd like to make the most of it, if that's okay with you. My friends, opportunity is dead. At least, that's what NASA would have us believe. Here we go. And we're back. Yeah, I have that voice. Yes, I do. Okay. 15 years ago, January 25th, 2004, NASA sent a little tiny rover called Opportunity. They sent it all the way up to Mars. It was supposed to be there for 90 days. It was going to capture images of that reddish planet that sits right up there in the sky and in our imagination. And you know what was amazing? This little rover that was supposed to be there for 90 days winds up outliving its mission by 55 times, and it is in operation for nearly 15 years. And it is only in the past year, in 2019, where this rover died. And the reason why is because it was powered not by batteries, not by Everlast, not by Duracell, but it was powered by the sun. And every time in the freezing climate on Mars, this thing stopped working and the sun would disappear from view, the sun would rise again, and again, it would power this little rover, and it would carry on, taking us to new sites on that distant planet. But ladies and gentlemen, or very few ladies, mostly gentlemen. Really? I did. Okay, I'll take that. All right, I'll have it. I'll take what I can get. Random clap. All right, yeah. Thank you. Thank you. If you could just laugh now like I told a great joke, that would also be awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I prepared that one earlier. Guys, what's amazing is that this rover finally stops and doesn't move on any longer. Because eventually, enough mud, enough dust covered its panels that when the wind would blow across the desolate expanse of Mars, it couldn't get the dust off the panels, and those panels were no longer exposed to the sun. And I was reading this article and I was shocked by something. It made me think that all of us are exactly like this little tiny rover, where the Torah and the mitzvot and our heritage and its wisdom is an eternal sun. It shines through the darkest of times. But sometimes it doesn't animate us. And sometimes the Jewish people loses its way. And sometimes people are disconnected. But it's not because the Torah is any less relevant. In fact, those images that I saw of you guys studying in the yeshiva just now, they made me cry. I'm 41 years old. But when I was 5 years old, every morning, my parents would stick me on a yellow school bus, and I would drive the 40 minutes that it would take to get here from Deal, New Jersey, because this was where you got a Torah education. So from the age of 5 until eventually I got married, and I studied in the same halls that you studied tonight. To see what I saw tonight was magnificent. Sometimes we get covered by a little bit of that dirt, and we are not accessing the power of the sun. And the question is why? There was an elderly Russian gentleman whose name was Zisha. Zisha was a caretaker in a synagogue called Landau's. It's a place where you could get a minyan any time of day or night. And this caretaker, he was noticed by one of the gabbais of the synagogue, a man whose name is Chaim Strulowitz. He sees this man, and every day he's there, he puts on a talit, but he's not putting on his tefillin. Every day, same story. He doesn't put on tefillin. And one day he walks up to him and he says, I've noticed you're not putting on the tefillin. Is there any reason why? And the man says, in a broken Russian accent, he says, I don't have tefillin. I don't have. Chaim says to him, don't you know there's extra pairs? You could borrow one of the pairs in the room. It's right over here. And the man says, yes, but the tefillin are very expensive. And I'm nervous. Maybe I'll drop it. Maybe I'll ruin it. I'm too nervous to use them. Chaim, he hears this man who clearly prays every day of his life. He doesn't have a pair of tefillin. He goes around quietly to a few of the rich men in the synagogue. He says, we have a Russian gentleman here who doesn't have a pair. Would you mind? They chip in and they buy a pair of tefillin. That morning, Chaim walks in and he says, Zusha, a few of the guys in the shul, they noticed, they put together a couple dollars and here's a pair of tefillin. And the man starts to cry. And he says, are these for me? And Chaim says, yeah, they're for you. Do you like me? Would you like me to show you how to put them on? And Zisha says, no, thank you. He takes the tefillin, rolls up his sleeve, puts on the shelyad, makes a blessing fluently. He puts it on like a champ. Then he gets the shel rosh, the one from the head, he puts it on again. He's Ashkenaz, so he makes the blessing on the head one, puts it on, fits it perfectly. And Chaim is wondering. He says to him, you don't have tefillin. When was the last time you put on tefillin that you put them on so well? Guys, listen to this. And Zisha says, roughly 60 years ago, on the day of my bar mitzvah, I was in Siberia with my father. We'd been banished because we were practicing Judaism in Russia. It was the day of my bar mitzvah. I put on the tefillin that day. And that day was the last day I saw the tefillin and my dad. I haven't put on since then. So he said, so how do you know how to make the blessing so well? And Zisha says, because every day since my bar mitzvah, in my mind, I put the tefillin on, I say the blessing, I imagine it. I haven't missed a single day since I was 13. But now, and he starts crying again, he says, now I'm putting them on for real. Guys, I've been doing this for a long time, speaking to people about Judaism, trying to inspire, to wake up a dormant spark, trying to get a little bit of the dust off the panels so that the light of the Torah can ignite those solar panels so that the machine can work again. None of us rabbis, we don't make you into wise Jewish people. All we do is kind of dust you off a little bit, expose you to the light, and then suddenly something which is your birthright kicks in. But for so long, for so many people, they have the words of Torah in their heart. They've been putting it on every day since their bar mitzvah. It just doesn't manifest in their brains as the words of a Talmud, Baba Kama, or Brachot. It doesn't manifest as the words of the parasha, but they're deeply proud of being Jews. And if you ask them why, they can't even explain it to you. From the moment they're born, those words of Torah are in their heart like Zisha. But maybe over the last few days, you've been able to put on an actual pair of tefillin, so to speak, and study the actual words. There was a woman whose name was Nina Ostrov. She came from the Soviet Union to Israel. And she would take her granddaughter Katya to school every day because her son and her daughter was so busy working that they couldn't, to support the family, that they couldn't take Katya. Katya goes to a school called Shuvu. And one day, Nina Ostrov walks in with her granddaughter, Katya, and she's jabbering, quickly speaking Russian, and nobody in the school knows what she's saying. But she seems to be very agitated. So they said to her, Nina, can we help you calm down? Is everything okay? Is there an emergency? Should we call 911? Or what do they have over there? 199, whatever it is. Israelis do that just to be difficult, by the way. Or either that or they just don't want the Americans to survive. You were a sadistic bunch of clappers, by the way. Woohoo! Nina, I don't speak Russian, so I can't do an impression. But Nina's chattering away in Russian. And they say, is everything okay? And she says, I want to speak to the principal. I don't know why I did a Russian accent in English. She was doing it in whatever. You get it. The principal comes in and he says, is everything all right? And Nina says, everything is fine. I just came here to thank you. You see, I didn't grow up with any religion back in Russia. I didn't grow up with any religion. But my grandparents were fiercely proud Jews. When I would go to their house, my grandpa, my Zayda, he would sit me on his knee and he would say to me, Nina, don't ever forget these words. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. And he would say them to me and he would sing them. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu. He would sing it every night. And I promised him. And my grandmother, when she would light the Shabbat candles, and I would go there for Shabbat, even though we weren't religious, she would make me promise. She would say, Nina, promise me. You'll never forget these words. Shema Yisrael. And I sat with her. And Nina says, and I tried so hard. I tried so hard over the years to remember it. But as it faded from life, as it faded from our lives, as we stopped saying Shema and we stopped praying, I forgot the words. And at night, I would sit in my bed and try and remember them. And then last night, I took my granddaughter Katya home from school. And I put her into bed and I read her a bedtime story. And I said, sweetheart, good night. And Katya said, oh, Grandma, we just learned in school there's something we're supposed to do before we go to sleep. And she covers her eyes and she says, Shema Yisrael. And Nina says, I found myself mouthing the words with her. The Torah does not belong to me as a rabbi or to rabbis with longer beards than myself. It is your birthright. It is the language of your youth. It's what your grandparents studied and what many of them begged with tears in their eyes as their children were pulled from them in a pogrom in Europe, or by the Nazis in Germany, or in Russia by the communists. They said, just remember one line. We've had the chance over the last few days to speak their words. We must remember to never let it fade from our collective memory. You know, we say in this Shema that Nina finally remembered, V'samtem et devarai ele. Please, God says, place these words, al levavchem, on your heart. And the Vilna Gaon, Rabbi Eliyahu Kramer, used to say that it's a strange expression. Surely you shouldn't put the words on your heart, you should put them in your heart. And the Vilna Gaon explained, he said, of course that would be better. But for so many of us, we have so much going on. And there's so many distractions in our world that not every time someone is trying to teach us something or someone is telling us to remember words, do those words actually enter into our heart? So the next best thing is to pile them on the heart. Because then in a moment of inspiration, when you're sitting in a Siyum Hashas and 90,000 Jews are celebrating something and it speaks to you, or you're in an accident and you pray to God, or you're suffering because you can't pass a test and you turn to God and you make a deal with God in that moment, your heart opens and all that's been sitting on that open heart for so long just falls in. There was a man whose name was Rabbi Moshe Shapiro. And in 1950, he was walking down a street in Tel Aviv called Allenby Street. Some of you may know it. He notices that there's a little kiosk and there's an elderly man standing there, big kippah on his head, long beard, stuck out in Tel Aviv. And he sees him running this kiosk. He runs up to the kiosk and he says, what are you doing here? You're a very religious Jew in the middle of Tel Aviv selling cigarettes and soda on the street. He says, where are you from? He says, I'm from Minsk. What's your name? He says, my name, I can't even pronounce it properly. He says, my name is Yankala Achstrug, or something like that. And I wish I could pronounce it properly. Achsenkrug, or something like that, of course, because of course, right? I'm going to be taking some of this with me, by the way, just to use for later. My name is Yankala Achsenkrug. And he says, and where are you from? He says, I'm from America. You're from America, he says? Do you know, he says, Arla Sislovicher? Because of course. And Rav Moshe Shapiro says, actually, I do. How do you know him? And this old man says, when I was in Minsk, I used to be a shochet. I would prepare animals to be kosher meat. And every time I would make a ruble, I would put aside 1 kopek, 1 penny. Eventually, those pennies added up, and I wanted to put them towards someone learning Torah. I found 2 boys in Minsk that seemed to be very wise and very studious. And I thought, you know what? If I could sponsor these boys to go to yeshiva, maybe I'll support Torah. Maybe I'll do something good. He said, and I sent 2 boys. I can't remember one of them's names, but the other one, his name was Arla Sislovicher. What a special boy that was. What a clever boy. And Rav Moshe is shaking. He says, I know Arla from America. He says he's known in America by a different name. In America, he was called Rabbi Aaron Cutler, the man who built the yeshiva that you all just learned in. Let me just rephrase. The place you just learned in was one of the rooms, of the many rooms that are huge, dominated by what is the biggest yeshiva in the world. He rebuilt Judaism and Torah Judaism in America. And who saved this man? Who made him Rabbi Aaron Cutler? Some guy who didn't even know what happened to him. He put a couple kopecks aside. A little while later, Rav Moshe Shapiro returns back to his job as a rabbi in Florida. And who comes to visit him on Shabbat? None other than Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, one of the other greats of the leaders of the Jews in America. He was the Rosh Yeshiva of a magnificent yeshiva called Torah Vadat. And he says, you know, I know, Rabbi, you were close with Rabbi Aaron Cutler. Let me tell you a story. And he mentions the story of Yankala and the kopecks and the train ride that sent the boys to study in yeshiva in Slobodka. And Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky said, I already know the story. I was the other boy. This little man in a forgotten kiosk on some street in Tel Aviv selling cigarettes and coke. Not that kind. All right. It was his kopecks that saved Judaism in America, that built the yeshiva that I learned in and many of your rabbis did. Guys, tonight you were sitting here with people who have also spent kopecks. You're sitting here with people who also spent of their time. They invested in you. They sat and studied with you and shared their stories with you. They supported this magnificent trip that you're on. Because we don't know if one of you might not be the next Rev Aaron Cutler or Rev Yaakov Kamenetsky. They were 2 regular boys and someone sent them to learn a little bit, to study in yeshiva, to spend a little time learning that language of their youth. What might become of any of you if you were to do what you just did for a couple of days for a little bit longer? Who knows? But guys, it doesn't matter if you become Reb Aaron Cutlers. It doesn't matter if you become Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky's. Because there's something that I want to share with each and every one of you. If a person experiences joy, excitement in their Judaism, if they feel alive when they are Jewish, if they sing Am Yisrael Chai and they jump up and down, if they hear of a terrorist attack in Israel and immediately feel a sense of kinship, Or what happened last week in Muncie, an attack in the middle of a Hanukkah celebration, only because the person was Jewish. If that fuels you, if that speaks to you, then your Jewish identity, your own personal Torah, that which makes you a Jew, is alive and kicking under your skin. You don't need to be a Rosh Yeshiva to claim the heritage of Torah, the language of your people. There was a young man whose name was Yaakov, and he decided that he wanted to be a scribe. If you've ever seen a Torah scroll, you'll know that it must be handwritten. It takes ages to write a Torah scroll. You have to pull the ink each bit by itself, shaping the letters. It takes a very long time. So new scribes, they don't start with a Torah. Many times they start with a mezuzah, one little square. Or they might start with a Megillah, the little scroll that we read on Purim. And Yaakov, this amateur scribe, did exactly the same. He started drawing letter by letter. He was finished. It didn't go as he'd hoped. The letters were uneven. It wasn't exactly straight lines. They didn't end on the same part of the line. It looked like it was a first attempt, but he'd worked really hard, so he wanted to sell it, but no one would buy it. They found someone who sold Judaica, and they said, maybe you come into more contact with more buyers. Would you put it on the market for us? And the guy said, sure. He goes to the house of a wealthy man, and he starts showing this wealthy man one magnificent Megillah after the next. Each one is more perfect than the one before it. And the man says, no, that's not it. No, no, no. And then he sees that there's one more scroll sitting on the side. He says, what about that one? And the guy says, no, you don't want that one. He says, no, let me decide. And they unroll the scroll. And immediately he looks at it and he smiles. And he says, this is the one that I want. I'll pay you $2,500 for it. And the seller says, have you not seen the other ones? Why do you want this one? And listen to what the man told him. He said, every one that I looked at was perfect. Not one bit out of the lines. It looked almost like it had been written by a computer. Perfection. But this Megillah, no letter is the same size as any other letter. Nothing fits exactly the way. This looks like it was drawn by hand. It looks like it was made by a human being. I want this Megillah. Guys, God wants that Megillah. You see, what makes it beautiful is the fact that it looks human. I grew up my whole life. I'm a rabbi. I'm the son of a rabbi. I was always going to do this. But what you did tonight, in the same place that I studied when I was becoming a rabbi, was so much more beautiful than anything I've ever done. Because it was messy, and it wasn't even, and you didn't quite know what all the words meant. God looks at that Megillah, and he says, this is the one. What you did was beautiful. I'll end with the words of Rav Shlomo Freifeld. Rav Shlomo Freifeld was talking about how each Jew must know all of Torah, all of Shas. And I'm sure at the Siyum HaShas, some of you thought that as well. And this is beyond me. How could I ever do this? So he spoke about it, and everyone was fired up. And everyone said, I'm going to start learning. And they all opened their books. And one boy said to the rabbi, he said, please, could I speak to you? And the boy, you could see that he was emotional, so he said, sure. He steps into the office of Shlomo, and he closes the door. He didn't want anyone to hear. And he said, Rabbi, it was so nice what you said, but it doesn't apply to me. I have a really, really bad form of dyslexia. I can't even read in English a sentence. I'm learning now how to read Hebrew. You know how long it takes me? Everyone else, you're telling them to finish books. I can barely read. Rav Shlomo Freifeld said, I hear you. Don't worry. Whatever you do is fine. Whatever you do is great. Come back tomorrow to my office. The boy leaves. The next morning, he comes bright and early to Rabbi Shlomo Freifeld's office. As he walks in, Rabbi Freifeld hands him a gift-wrapped package. It's thin, it's skinny, and it's long. He opens up the package, and inside he sees Talmud Bavli, a leather-bound Talmud Bavli, one of the books of the Talmud. Brachot. He opens up the book, and inside the book is only one page. Rav Freifeld had removed all the other pages in the book. All that was there was one page. Rav Freifeld hugged his student, and he said, finish this and make a Siyum. It is not about the quantity of what we learn. It is the quality of our engagement, of how excited we are, how switched on we are to understand that we are part of an evolving Jewish story. You know, if you're Jewish and something happens to you, it's a story that happens to be Jewish. If your story is Jewish, that's part of the Jewish story. My father ran away from Syria when he was 17 years old. My grandfather ran away from Germany when he was 8 years old. And here we are, living in countries around the world, where in every one of these countries, we have the most magnificent opportunities. The only question for our uneven Megillah, or for our one-page Gemara, the only question that Olami is asking of you is the question that God himself asks of you. Give me the best you got. I promise you that is good enough. I promise you that is beautiful. I promise you that is what your great-grandparents would look down on you now, see, and be so proud of. May God bless all of us to make the people who made this event tonight, to make them proud to have invested their capex in us. May we one day be people who our grandchildren will look to for true Jewish wisdom and guidance. And may we be zocheh, may we merit to experience that joy, that vigor, that effort that you saw in the Siyum Hashas, where the cheers and the screams were louder than any I've ever heard in that stadium. May we once again celebrate the beauty of Torah as ever it was celebrated before. Thank you so much. Shavua Tov.